Welcome, everyone, to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual cognitive behavior and neurolinguistic programming practitioner specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage and relationship coaching, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one sessions in both French or English, and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMB Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at lifecoachddanamzallag.com. In today's 8th episode of season 33, I'm very excited to have Garrett Wood as our special guest and expert in modalities such as hypnotherapy and dialectical therapy when dealing with childhood trauma and the long-term positive effect of psychotherapy when being consistent when attending sessions. So, without further ado, and as with all of our previous episodes, I will leave it up to the guest to properly introduce himself, as no one can do a better job. Garrett, the floor is yours.
Thanks for having me here, Dr. Dan. I'm excited to share a little bit about hypnotherapy and DBT today, and how helpful and beneficial it can be for people, especially those that have had really challenging, painful past learning experiences, and how to help make it a little bit more adaptive as they continue to move through those environments.
Beautiful. Well, it is a pleasure to have you here, Garrett. Especially you and I, we share similarities in terms of how psychotherapy can actually help people if they're consistent in attending their session and not thinking that after 3 or 4 sessions they feel that, oh, I feel better, so I'm going to stop. No, sometimes it's important to be able to continue on. Just like, I consider psychotherapy like when you have a bacterial infection and the doctor gives you like antibiotics, and after 3 days you feel better, so you stop taking the medication, but then the infection comes back. So you have to be consistent. You have to go and go until you feel, or until your therapist feels that, you know what, I think you're good to go on your own. So I know a lot of people are very, very familiar with a specific modality that has been discussed in the news and in the field of psychology, which has helped a lot of people dealing with trauma, and it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is EMDR. If you could just explain to the listeners, what is the difference between EMDR dealing with trauma and DBT dealing with trauma?
Yeah, great question. So with DBT, we're more thinking about a way of being in the world versus processing a specific memory. And so it's actually dealing with the feeling that shows up in the moment when you're in the face of something that triggers that response from our painful past learning. And then how do we handle that discomfort? So it's really about that distress tolerance, which
Mhm.
requires some mindfulness, and then being able to regulate our emotions, feel them, accommodate them, and then be able to make sure that those behaviors don't always influence or those emotions don't always influence our behaviors. The Viktor Frankl quote, that space between reaction and response,
Mhm.
DBT is really about making it easier to manage that process.
Absolutely. No, so you mentioned a few of the components of DPT, which is mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness, and also dialectical. So dialectics is primarily finding a balance between both extremes, which is when someone accepts themselves as they are, but yet also working towards changes. So isn't that kind of like a paradox, which is if you accept yourself who you are at this moment, why are you willing to do change on it?
Yeah, and that can feel very challenging, right?
Mhm.
And so something I think that is interesting is if we think about that, like that middle path and walking that, there's the idea of virtues, and one of those is bravery or courage, courageousness. But what a lot of people think of as courageous is that that person doesn't feel fear. They're just acting courageous. And what's actually true is they feel fear, but it doesn't change their behavior or their actions. They still go through with a challenging task. Because if they didn't feel fear at all, we would actually call that foolhardy or foolishness or impulsivity, where they're going to run and jump off a cliff because they've never thought about the out-term long consequences.
Yes,
And so that idea of courage requires the feeling of fear. So sometimes fear and courage are antonyms in our minds, but in reality, fear is a necessary component of being able to act courageously.
so when it comes to the key component of DBT, which is mindfulness, um,
Yeah.
when people like deal with their thoughts and feelings on the day-to-day basis. And as you know, there's around 60,000 thoughts that passes through our mind every single day. How can you be mindful with all of those thoughts? Isn't like a barrage of all those thoughts coming in can be overwhelming, and then this just increases stress, anxiety, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I imagine if someone was on a train looking out a window, I know in France they have lots of really nice trains that we don't have here in the States. But if you were to try to look at every single piece of countryside that went by through that window when you're traveling at high speeds, that would get you dizzy and overwhelmed.
Yes.
But if instead you kind of take like a step back and take some long, slow, deep breaths, and then you take in the entire landscape passing by your window, it's actually a really enjoyable, relaxing, pleasing experience. And so if we have those 6,000 thoughts or more flying through our head consciously every day, if we try to pay attention to every single one, we are going to get overwhelmed. But developing that skill to sit back and take in that wider view is actually an enjoyable experience for most people when they practice it.
So in a way, we have to kind of compartmentalize everything that we see on a day-to-day basis to not get overwhelmed. Because again, people who are dealing with mental health challenges, they do not have that ability to be able to kind of like sort out all those thoughts and then extract only the one that are positive, because we tend as human beings, as this may be human nature, to only put our energy on the things that we cannot control, which is one of the philosophy of stoicism, the dichotomy of control. So how does DBT allow people to really understand focusing their energy on things that they can control versus the thing that they can't?
Yeah, and I love that overlap there with some of that common wisdom. I feel like that's come through with the Serenity Prayer, where it's grant me the wisdom to know the difference between the things I can change and the things I can't, and the ability to act. But that idea of distress tolerance when it comes to DBT is really where that comes in at. There are so many things you can't affect, but can we endure through those? So it allows us to be able to see the things that we can affect change on. And it's amazing how little interventions make a big difference over time when we're consistent with them. And so I do think that that distress tolerance and building that skill and that ability up is really powerful component of DBT when it comes to that.
And when you have like all of the people dealing with mental health challenges, especially after the pandemic, Garrett, we
Yeah.
see a lot of people not knowing exactly what is the best approach that will help them the most in the most effective way. And because of so many modalities like ACT, DBT, REBT, EMDR, and the list goes on and on, how would someone know what is the best modality that will address their problem effectively?
So I have a couple thoughts about that. So one, it seems like the therapeutic relationship, so that relationship that you have, that rapport you have with whatever provider you choose to work with, seems to be a really important component. And without that, the rest of it even gets more challenging. The other part is it seems like whichever modality you're using, one thing that seems to be consistent is this idea of memory reconsolidation, where we're updating our beliefs about ourselves, the world, and others in real time. And that is different for everybody. And so whatever tool naturally kind of draws you into it, when you hear about it or hear people talking about it, it draws your curiosity. That might be a good start. And it may not be the big end of that journey, even if it is the beginning. So I've gone through myself many modalities and learned a little bit from all of them and appreciated changes for all of them. And I do think there's a combined benefit over time for people when they're able to experience more than one modality. So keep your ear to the ground and see what naturally draws you to it, and make sure you feel really connected to that practitioner of whichever modality that may be.
But I mean, there's some basis to those modalities, Garrett. So, for example,
Yeah.
it will be good for, let's say, trauma, will be good for eating disorders, will be good with substance abuse.
Yes.
EMDR will be good with PTSD and other issue that someone deals with. CBT will
Yeah.
be good with others as well. So, is there like a certain specific umbrella that if, let's say, someone goes and try to read the DSM-5, and will they, on the DSM-5, will it says that, okay, this modality will be good for treating those behaviors?
Absolutely. And so, depending on what that looks like for you, what you're presenting with, there is a preferred mode of action. And your insurance usually helps support through that process. But in addition to that, it's important for you to be able to feel like you have an active participation in it. And so, noticing and naming kind of those different modalities and which one speaks to you so you can continue to move forward in an informed manner is also empowering and helpful for people.
So, okay, now let me put you into a scenario here, Garrett.
Yeah,
So,
I love it.
someone who have had like, let's say someone who's an HSP, which is a highly sensitive person, and they focus
Hmm.
too much their energy on making other people happy at their own expense, and feeling too much either negative or positive energy from other people and absorbing it. And of course, that will change the way that they see themselves and they see society in general. So, when it comes to the interpersonal effectiveness, which is one of the components of DBT, do you think that someone who has another challenge to deal with, will it contradict the way that they have to behave? I mean, in terms of how DBT can help them?
So there's a way to apply any modality for that specific person in front of you. And so a skilled practitioner, if you're a highly sensitive person, should be able to understand and get into your world a little bit with you, because even one highly sensitive person is not the same as every other highly sensitive person out there. And so making sure that they're able to modify that so it actually appeals to you in a way that's beneficial and helpful is really important. But that idea of building that interpersonal effectiveness with setting boundaries
Mhm.
um, is going to be a new, different challenge. And so practicing it in a safe environment with someone where it feels helpful might even make that transition from doing it with your provider into doing it with someone else in your personal life. And so oftentimes people are practicing that in therapy, which is interesting.
So if let's say one of the strategy that you use in your modality of DBT, if that doesn't really stick, would you implement hypnotherapy right after to see if both combined together can actually bring a better result?
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite parts about hypnotherapy is often in therapy we get these insights and we get these frameworks and we make these understandings of ourself, and that's important. But then sometimes it's different to try to do that and act it in real time. And so a lot of people benefit from using hypnotherapy because they're able to see and experience what it feels like to be able to apply those insights in real time.
Mhm.
Because we usually learn through experiential processes. And the more intense that experience is, the easier it is to continue to learn and grow and adapt. And so, if you're able to encounter a formerly challenging situation in a relaxed body, which is what hypnotherapy is, and stay that way, it makes it much easier to replicate that when it comes up in the real world.
Mhm, absolutely. But there's been like in the past few years, I'm not sure it's because there's a lot of people who are not really, I would say, qualified or skilled for this, and they're afraid that if they get hypnotized, you're going to access their subconscious mind and destroy the way they think or the way they feel, etc. So the stigma that has been stuck with hypnotherapy, can you just give some more idea to the listeners about why they should not fear hypnotherapy and they should welcome it in terms of what is really your responsibility as a practitioner to be able to help them navigate through the challenges that they face.
Yeah, great question. And hypnotherapy has a pretty interesting past. And so it's got a long storied history as a pretty effective intervention. A lot of famous, iconic psychologists have used it at one point in time in their practices. But what's really interesting is now I think people understand a little bit more that all hypnosis is self-hypnosis,
Mhm. Correct.
that when you're working with, like, say, a personal trainer or a physical therapist, they're not lifting the weights for you. They're guiding you on how to best lift those weights to get the results you're looking for.
Correct.
Because you can go to the gym every day and get really sweaty, but 6 months later, you can still not see any changes in your strength or stamina. And sometimes you can actually make it worse because you overtrain or do something silly, an inappropriate movement. And so, if hypnosis is similar to that, all hypnosis is self hypnosis. You're the one that has to lift the weights. The hypnotherapist is there to help guide you to make sure that that effort that you're doing is helpful at making it easier to feel like yourself in a healthy and adaptive way.
So, okay, so someone that comes to you, Garrett, for
Yeah.
hypnotherapy, they will say, okay, you will first ask them, what are the 3 points that you like to be able to solve in your life at this given moment? Which means like if someone they want to be more generous, they want to be more caring, they want to be distant. So you will focus your hypnotherapy on those points primarily. And by allowing them to go into that trance and repeating those words over and over again, then you're going to give them those anchors, which means that when they feel specifically a certain way, that makes them feel uncomfortable, you're going to have them to close their eyes and to repeat those anchors, which will be somewhat of a trigger that will remind them of the time that they were hypnotized by you.
So sometimes when we're in hypnotherapy, we're trying to recreate an experience that they've already had in a way that's helpful for those goals. So if they want to be more patient, more kind, better boundaried, then we would ask, in a conscious part of the session, hey, when is a time where that was true for you? What looked like that then? What did it feel like in that moment to be aligned with your values and these goals that you have? And so we use a little bit of that kind of appreciative inquiry, like what have you already done that's been successful in the past? How could we do more of that in the future?
Mhm.
And they usually provide pretty decent answers of this is what it felt like to be me, and this is what I would like to feel more of, and this is how it's easier or more challenging to feel that. And so then when we get into a state of hypnosis, part of that hypno journey is that visualization of that pain, that past success, and then also envisioning a future where there's even more of that, and then allowing themselves to be able to ask their own subconscious mind to get creative about ways to make it even easier to recreate that. And then to help support them, we would do that anchoring process that would make it easier to, squeeze their hand or take a deep breath or, whatever that feeling or sensation that makes easy and effortless for them to recreate that experience and lean into that emotion and that knowing in that moment. And then practice that a few times, even there in that state of hypnosis as they continue to move forward. And then when they come out, and sometimes you're like, hey, how was it? What do you remember? And they're like, I don't remember anything. And you're like, oh, okay. But then they come back the week later and they're like, I did this thing and I did it a long time ago. It was great. And it was amazing. And so it's a really fun, exciting process and a relaxing one as well.
So another term for hypnosis or self-hypnosis is meditation.
Very similar practices. Yeah. Meditation, usually you can have a guided meditation or you can do it by yourself. With hypnotherapy, there's a little bit more intent behind it because we're doing a little bit more of a desensitization process and building strengths. And so it's creating and reinforcing those neural networks that people already have and helping them support them. So that way, when they experience the world in reality, they can run those programs or those parts of themselves that are the most effective at being in that environment that they appreciate about themselves.
So I am an avid meditator, okay, Garrett,
Mm,
every single day. But I don't do it during the day. I do it when actually I go to sleep, and I put a self-guided
yeah.
audio that I let it play all through the night because it is known that when you fall asleep, your subconscious mind kind of kicks in, and your conscious
Mhm.
is being put to sleep. So whatever you listen during that the time that you're sleeping, actually you absorb, of course, all the positive, let's say, affirmations that you listen
Mhm.
on that audio, and then by the time
Mhm.
that you wake up, it is being absorbed, and then the subconscious mind can redirect how consciousness should behave.
Absolutely. Yeah. And some people's common experience of that is they'll listen to music or they'll fall asleep while the TV's playing. And in their dream, they will actually incorporate some of the sounds of those TV shows or that music playing. And a lot of people have experienced that. They're like, oh, that thing was happening in my dream. And then
Yeah.
they wake up and, they're able to see that. But the mind absorbs that information into the subconscious and then even puts it into their dreams, which is an interesting part of um, our normal natural physiology that everybody uses. And hypnosis is a state you transfer through on your way to sleep. So it's pretty powerful to set it up the way you have for yourself, which is amazing.
But isn't it true that usually the dreams happen maybe just a few minutes before we actually wake up?
There's definitely different parts of dreams for people throughout their night. I'm not a neuroscientist, nor am I a dream expert. It sounds like you are. But something I have found is really interesting is this concept of venting dreams,
Mhm.
where people have a dream just before they wake up that might have a little bit more of an intense tone to it. Instead of being calming and comforting, it might be a little bit more anxiety inducing if they were to watch it as a movie. And sometimes people feel that that is the subconscious releasing that thought or that fear or that belief that's no longer serving them. And they're processing it out through that dream, which I think is really fascinating. I don't know how you'd be able to prove that one way or the other, but it does seem to be an interesting and helpful concept sometimes.
I mean, there's a meaning to every dream. And I mean, obviously, sometime in my practice, people tell me, hey, Dan, I dreamt this. What does it mean? And for me, I have to go deep into understanding if that dream was caused because of something they already experienced in the past and it has been just resurfacing recently. And I tell them, I
Yeah.
try to see if this dream is recurring or if it's just a one-time deal. If it's recurring, that means that something has not been resolved from the past. And that dream is telling you, try to get the help that you need to be able to understand why this is happening over and over again.
Absolutely. The subconscious tries to communicate with us as best as it can through our body. But our conscious mind is such a little narrow pen light of a flashlight in
Yeah.
there from what's actually really happening. So it's kind of interesting to have to be a little bit of a detective looking for those clues. And
Yes.
trying to do that by yourself is a little overwhelming because you only know what you know. So,
And
yeah.
this is why I recommend people to never have a TV in their bedroom. The reason
Mm,
is if they listen to the news at night, and we both know,
mm,
you and I, Garrett, that the news is filled with negativity, with always concern, chaos, because this is how they get people stuck or addicted to it. So if this
yep.
is the last thing that you remember at night before you go to sleep, no wonder people wake up with the being depressed, anxious, and so on and so forth, because the last thing that the brain was able to capture and to record was negativity. And then you basically feed your subconscious mind right before going to sleep. And then you just allow it to understand what just happened, which was seeing negativity. And then the next morning, that's why people are waking up so dreadful, so angry, so frustrated, so anxious, so depressed. And then they need medication to be able to solve that problem, which cause other problems.
Yeah. It is really challenging to carry that negative news cycle into your subconscious, especially because the way it's positioned is it's so disempowering. It's these horrible, awful things are happening. There's nothing you can do about it. And that implicit message, I don't think is ever really stated with the news broadcasts, but it's definitely something we experience. And that lack of agency with that intensity of that negativity is a pretty challenging message. That concept of learned helplessness. I feel like if we're doing a slow drip exposure of the news and no agency, it can recreate and make it easier for fertile soil for that learned helplessness to be developed for sure.
Absolutely. So, in your practice, what would you say, or what would you practice more? I mean, since irony, like in your practice, practicing more, is it more of the dialectical therapy that people come to see you, or more hypnotherapy?
A lot of people reach out for hypnotherapy because they have a specific issue that they want to see changed and addressed in a timely manner. So they might have a presentation coming up that they have to give at work, and they have a history of not being able to deliver a presentation.
Okay.
It's really fascinating because when you ask them when that problem first started, they'll say something when they were 8 or 10 even. And it just shows up consistently. And it's really interesting because who they were when they were 8 and 10 is not who they are now at 45 and presenting to a room of 5,000 people about their expertise that they have, you know, advanced degrees in. But then also the idea is when we're in a conscious state, a lot of the DBT tools and skills are really powerful to help make it easier to be you so you can perform in those moments where you need to. And so it is kind of a mix of those. We do some conscious work, we do some hypnotherapy to help support those changes, and then some conscious tools using DBT to make it even easier to maintain them in real life.
So, when it comes to people expecting results in DBT, let's say someone who comes every single week to be able to follow through their session as compared to hypnotherapy, how long does it take for people to see result after a couple session of hypno?
Yeah, so with DBT, people are learning skills and then applying them. So the more they practice them, the quicker they can see the results. There's a little bit of agency there, which is great. With hypnotherapy, it's a little bit more passive of an intervention because we're laying down and allowing ourselves to relax in a deep focused state of awareness. But typically, we record those sessions and provide it to the clients. And so they're able to continue that practice on their own as well. And then eventually they can make that transition like you have to where they're able to go into that state of deep focused awareness without necessarily having it be facilitated.
Mhm.
But oftentimes it's really helpful for people to kind of practice that. And so typically it's over 90 days is what we usually see as kind of a first course of action. And at the end of those 90 days, sometimes we're meeting twice a week, sometimes we're meeting once a week, depending on availability and the client's needs. The idea is at the end of that, oh, they're feeling much more stable day to day. They can see those changes. They can reinforce them and support themselves on their own and continue to grow. But then they'll encounter a new scenario or a new situation where some of those old habits or behaviors come back. And so then we revisit and kind of clean up from there.
Mhm.
And then if they go into a new environment that's more challenging for them, whether that's something with family, friends, or work, that's also when we come back and kind of do another little deep dive.
Mhm. So when it comes to the skill training that DBT has, such as diary cards, how soon do you get them to be able to write down or follow through some of those cards to be able to kind of determine exactly if there's a trend in their behavior or if there's something that they need to resolve after writing down what happened the day before.
Yeah. And so some people are keeping notes because they're pretty diligent with those cards. Some people are recording voice memos to themselves. Some people are sending text messages to themselves. Some people are sending emails to themselves. Some people are almost sending me emails as if, "Hey, this thing just happened, and I'm going to share it with you." So journaling in the diary cards can be adaptive for whatever feels easiest for that person's learning style. But then being able to reflect on those and kind of going through that process, there's a series of questions we can ask about those at the end of the day. And we can kind of do that every day ourselves, whether they're present in therapy or not. And so having those nighttime moments to kind of get into that focused, deep state of awareness where you're kind of calm, and then reading through those texts, those emails, whatever it may be, those voice messages, and then looking for insights or themes and getting kind of curious with those things is a really interesting part of that DBT practice. And I think the more diligently people take part in that inquiry, the more productive each one of our sessions are, and the more productive the hypnotherapy is as well, because we're able to apply those self-learned insights into the subconscious, which is a really powerful tool.
So if you see with one of your clients that either DBT or hypnotherapy does not work, because not all modality is going to work for every single patient or client, what
Mhm.
is the next step that you would suggest?
Yeah, if they're not seeing the results that they would like to see, um, absolutely. I have a team of people that I enjoy being able to refer to. And I'm always looking for more expert providers because when you're good, you fill up quick. And so it's really nice to be able to offer them different modalities based upon the presenting issues and what seems like would be more helpful for them. And then making those introductions and seeing if there's enough rapport for them to feel encouraged to pursue that in a way that feels helpful and supportive for them.
I'm always looking for DBT experts, so you're definitely going to be in my list as well, Garrett. So I'm going to definitely refer you some people when it comes to things that I don't. I mean, I know a lot about DBT, but not, not really as I would say expert as you. So that's definitely something that we can work together in that aspect. So first and foremost, like, how can people find you if they need any of the hypnotherapy or DBT?
Yeah, if people are interested, they can reach out to my website. It's Gnosis Therapy. And that's kind of a little play on words. My name's Garrett, so it's got a G there at the beginning of Gnosis. And Gnosis rhymes with hypnosis. So gnosistherapy.com is my website.
And when it comes to, do you give like any specific video or Instagram post that people can read or sign up to, or just to be able to listen to some of the techniques that you use for hypnotherapy?
Yeah, I post on LinkedIn because I work with a lot of professionals. And then I also post on Instagram as well because it's a little bit more personable of a platform. And so those are both at Gnosis Therapy as well.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Garrett, that is all the time that we have for today's podcast. And again, thank you sincerely for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. And we all appreciate your participation to this episode by sharing with us the importance of addressing trauma with effective modalities that psychotherapy can offer to resolve most of the challenges adults deal with after long-term suffering. Now, to our millions of listeners out there, we hope that you've enjoyed today's episode as much as we did. And we're also very excited for what's ahead in season 33 of the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, featuring a lineup of incredible guests with powerful stories that will continue to uplift and inspire all of you. Now, here are some concluding words of wisdom. Childhood trauma has a way of echoing into adulthood when it is left unaddressed, shaping our beliefs, relationship, and sense of self. Many people carry these invisible wounds for years without realizing how deeply they influence their thoughts and behaviors. The encouraging truth is that healing is possible. Evidence-based approach like dialectical therapy or hypnotherapy provide powerful tools to help people understand their emotions, challenge harmful thoughts patterns, and build healthier coping skills. Through these methods, individuals learn how to regulate emotion, develop resilience, and rewrite the internal stories formed during painful moments in childhood. Facing those wounds may feel difficult, but avoiding them often allows the pain to quietly grow stronger over time. When we choose to confront and process the past with the right support, we reclaim control over our present. Healing childhood trauma is not about erasing the past, it is about freeing your future. My name is Dr. Dan Amzallag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life. Stay tuned for our next episode.